Welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast with your host, Johnny Gorky. You have the power to overcome challenges and fears. Let my voice and the voice of many others show you how to transform these challenges into opportunities. To learn more about future podcasts and read episode show notes, check out my website at www.thepowerofyourvoice.com.
Hey guys, it's Johnny. Thank you for being a loyal listener of the Power of Your Voice podcast. I appreciate you for taking a moment out of your busy day to listen. This is episode 40. Today's episode is an extra special podcast interview because I get to interview a gentleman who's like a father to me. He is my wife's father. This gentleman is Colonel Cornelius Freeman III. While in college, he joined the prestigious Omega Psi Phi fraternity. He served in the United States Airforce for 5 years, became a medical doctor, and later joined the United States Army, where he retired as a colonel. During this interview, we discuss all the beautiful things life has to offer. As a child, he grew up very poor, but he had a vision for his entire life. He shares his wisdom of marriage, raising a family, having great relationships, how to cope with the loss of a loved one, why you should follow your dreams, what the true definition of leadership is, and what really matters most in life. Welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast. Here I have my father-in-law, Dr. Cornelius Freeman, on the Power of Your Voice podcast. I'm going to be interviewing him today. So my first question to you is, what are you most proud of?
Wow, I never thought about that much, but I guess I would have to say I'm most proud of my kids because I'll be honest with you and to say that at one point I hadn't anticipated having kids, but I got to thinking about it and I decided, well, if I don't do this, then I may live to regret it one day, so maybe I ought to consider it. And then I got a big push from the wife who was really interested in having kids. And so I said, well, I guess we better go ahead and do this. And so did. And I don't regret it, at all. I'm happy that we made that decision. And that's probably my proudest thing is my kids, to be honest.
That's good. You ever think about if you didn't have kids, how would your life been different?
Oh, maybe I would just be a playboy. No, just kidding. But anyway, I don't know. I think things would be a little bit more empty, And I'm sure I would have done things different in the sense that I would not have had the same, I would not have had to do the same kind of planning that if you don't have anybody to be responsible for, then there's nothing that you have to concern yourself with. You can just go and say, oh, I think I'll go and go to Barcelona or I'll go to south of France or whatever. And it doesn't give you, to me, it wouldn't give me a sense of responsibility. I would have probably enjoyed life, and especially when the kids were young and growing up, I wouldn't have had that responsibility. So I would have probably been able to play a lot more, but I don't think the same richness, especially when you consider after kids, grandkids, and the extended family that comes along with that, I would not have had any of that had I not chosen to have the kids.
Now you have
my kids,
5 grandkids.
Absolutely. And so that's something that's, still in the works, the grandkids. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes. And it would be nice that I could live long enough and have the wherewithal and be sound of mind to see the youngest of my grandkids grow up to be a young lady, at least 18. I would love to see that. If I did that, then I'd say, okay, I'm good. I can go anytime now.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I think what I think about now, and that would be my goal. If I were able to reach that, then I'd be good.
Now, for some people who might be listening to, because I know my sister, she was kind of in this situation with her husband. Sometimes you have you have 2, husband and wife, they get married, and they're thinking, I've always want kids, but the person you're with doesn't want kids. What do you do in that situation?
Well, you have to follow your own truth. I think what you do is you talk to them and decide if they truly don't want kids and you truly do, then say, okay, I love you, but we're going to have to go. I'm going to have to go. Or, yeah. I mean, that's the only way I can see you doing it, because otherwise you can't just have kids and stay with them because they don't want kids. It's not necessarily about whether they want kids with you. It's that they don't want kids. And so you have to move on to somebody else if you want kids, or you have to have them by yourself. But you have to take that person out of the picture if that's what your desires are.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, with your daughter and I, it's like it was great because she wanted kids and I wanted kids, so we didn't have any issues. But yeah, you might have somebody who wants kids, the other person doesn't want kids, and then for the rest of their life, they're going to regret that they never had kids. So yeah, I was like, if you really want kids, you don't want to have regrets in your life, it's probably best to get someone else, as hard as that might be.
Yep, I don't see it any other way, even though you might love that person. If that's what your desires are, I think, we only live once, and so you kind of maybe need to consider that. Depends on how strongly you want it,
Yeah. You've been through probably a lot of challenging situations that you faced throughout your life. What are some situations that you probably went through throughout your entire life, through being a colonel, being a medical doctor? And they might have been really challenging in your life, but you're very glad you went through those situations, because if you didn't, you wouldn't have learned different things or whatever that might have been.
I can tell you the most challenging situation for me that I ever went through was pledging the fraternity. And part of that was due to the fact that I was a student in school, so I'm still having to go to school. But at the same time, it was both physically and mentally exhausting to be pledging, as well as, when I say physical, I mean in many ways, in terms of the challenges that were presented to us in terms of physical training that we had to go through, and also some of the punishments that were meted out to us in the process. Thus, basically what I'd have to say about that is, more than anything else, I think that prepared me for life's ups and downs, because basically anytime after that I was faced with a situation that was tough, I could always go back to that and say, hey, you did this and you were able to go to school and get your grades and all that kind of stuff and do the training and put up with all the hardships that you had to go through during that pledge period. And if you can go through that, you can go through just about anything. An aside on that is, one of the people that was pledging on the line with me had been to Vietnam. And he made the comment that he was at Vietnam in the rice paddies and out there fighting the war and all that kind of stuff. But he felt like it was a piece of cake compared to what we were doing. He thought this was much worse than what he had gone through in Vietnam.
Really?
That's what he said, yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, he was like a Green Beret kind of guy. He knew all of the martial arts and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, he kind of had during our pledge period, something happened. They were, doing things to us, and he kind of had a flashback and went into a stance, and everybody had to back off of him real quick because he was getting ready to do some serious damage until we brought him down from that and brought him back to reality,
Dang.
But he kind of had a post-traumatic thing, and so they realized, we better leave him alone.
So joining a fraternity was harder, more challenging than being in Vietnam for him.
That's what he said.
Dang. So what fraternity did you join? And for anyone who might be listening, maybe they're in college and they're thinking about, maybe I want to join a frat, but I'm scared or don't really know. What would you say to them?
Well, what I would say is that the same thing that happened to me in 1965 would not apply in this day. They don't nearly allow the same kind of punishments and stuff like that. You can still go through the mental challenges, and that's good, where they can psychologically stress you out which we do, and we still do that.
Hazing.
But yeah, some of the hazing, some of the things that we do, But you wouldn't go through some of the physical challenges that we went through at that time. And so it wouldn't be necessarily relevant for them to compare 1965 with today. I would compare it in terms of mental challenges, but not in terms of physical challenges. I don't think they would have to go through nearly the kind of things that we had to go to when we did that then.
So if you're thinking about
I'd say go
pledging,
for it.
pledge.
I'd say pledge. It's a brotherhood. And for instance, just like when I was recently at homecoming, my brothers and I, we all get together and we know each other because you spend a lot of time with these guys, and it's a brotherhood, and we laugh and we do, but we know each other, and we can say and do anything with each other because of that brotherhood that we formed during our pledge period.
So would you say it's kind of similar to the brotherhood that you might get when you're in the military?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. People who go through things like Marines and, all of those kinds of situations where you have a lot of hardships and you have to depend on each other to get through it, and that's the purpose of it. For instance, if you go to war, a lot of the training is set up to make you depend on each other and know that if something happens, you can count on your brother to help you out, because you have formed this bond where in many cases, in most cases, they would be willing to die for you, to help you, because that's how strong the bonds are in many cases. It's not that way always, but that's the goal, and it works.
So at the end of the day, when you pledge into the fraternity, it's if your brother needs help, maybe you can help him find a job, whatever it is, you're supposed to be there to support them and help them the best way you possibly can without doing something.
I wouldn't even say supposed to be. Basically, if he calls you up, you pretty much will answer the call.
Okay. So that's good.
Yeah.
I can see why it definitely would be a good thing. So I wanted to ask you, what does happiness mean to you? Happiness.
Well, it's funny you should ask that, but happiness to me has been always pretty much my philosophy of life. Somebody asks me, what's your goal and your philosophy? I just say, basically, to be happy. And that entails a whole lot of things in nothing almost, It's a state of mind is all I can say about it, Really, happiness is not having to be stressed out about a lot of things, hopefully money issues. Probably, in my case, that's probably the biggest. Since I grew up as poor as I did, money becomes a central issue for me. If I have enough, then to me, that's pretty much happiness, because with money, you can do just about what you want to do. And for me, that kind of sums it up, because I am an independent kind of person, and I always pretty much all my life have done pretty much what I wanted to do. And if something got in the way or someone told me I couldn't do it, sorry, that didn't work for me. It never has worked. It never would work. I've never allowed anybody to tell me what I could or could not do. And that constitutes happiness for me, to be my own person, to do what I want to do, and not allow anybody to stop me from doing anything that I choose to do.
Yeah,
that's happiness.
That's good, yeah, because for some people they think, well, if I have all this money, I'll buy cars, I'll have houses, maybe have women, whatever it might be. And then they get those things and they realize it really doesn't bring them happiness.
It does not.
Having your family, having people you love in your life, friends, all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, that's really what's the most important thing. Because, you can't buy that stuff no matter how much money you have.
That's true.
Now, as a child, so as you just mentioned, you grew up poor. How was that experience being a child who grew up poor, and what life lessons did you learn growing up that way? That I
didn't want to be that way. That's the biggest life lesson. That I wanted something different, What I can say about that, since my father was a teacher, many people felt like, okay, well, his dad is a teacher. So they must have, means, Turns out that wasn't necessarily the case, and because while he was a teacher, many things, his values were more aligned with the church. The church came first. It seems like, uh, now, I'm sure this wasn't the case, but to me it seemed like church came before his kids and stuff like that. He would provide for the church before he would provide for his kids. Now, I always had an issue with that. Again, if I had an opportunity to talk to him about that in later life, he might have told me something different. Didn't get that opportunity, and so, or I didn't take that opportunity, to put it that way.
So for someone might be listening, they don't really know, what is poor? Because poor to everybody is different. Like, how was your childhood growing up? Like, did you get stuff for Christmas? Did you live in a small house? How many people lived in a house? That kind of thing. Like, kind of create a picture of that.
All right, picture that. We lived in a shotgun house. There was one bedroom. Okay, you walk in the front door, there's the living room with a fireplace. Then the bedroom was right straight behind that. If you know what a shotgun house is, you walk in the front door and you can see all the way through to the back of the house, basically. There's a hallway that goes, and you look in the front door and you can look out the back mostly. Well, the bathroom did block that, so it wasn't strictly a shotgun house, but it was almost like that. So you go in the front of the house, there's the living room, which is about, let's say, maybe 14 by 12 or something like that. The bedroom, about the same size. And then the kitchen and the bathroom, about the size of the bedroom or the living room. All three of the kitchen and the bathroom together are about the size of the one bedroom and the one living room. So those are 3 rooms. There is my mother, my father, my 3 sisters, and I. So 4 kids and 2 parents. And that's the space that we lived in.
6 people? They all slept in the same bedroom?
No. We didn't all sleep in the bedroom.
Okay.
Pretty much. We slept in the living room. The kids did. Say the living room, the front room, the first room. Either on the couch or on a roll-out bed that we put out every night. And the couch was a couch that you could fold out and it let out into a bed. So two people slept on the couch. One slept on the roll-out bed, which was usually me, and my youngest baby sister would sleep in the room with my parents most of the time until we got older. But yeah, in the bedroom. So 3 or 4 of us slept in the front room. My parents were in the bedroom with maybe 1 child. And then we had the bathroom and the kitchen. And that's the extent of the house.
Yeah, so it's not like today where you have some parents, they have 6 bedrooms, everyone has their own bedroom, their own bed, and all that kind of stuff. You guys didn't have that.
Nobody had their own bed.
Wow. And then, like, what kind of food did you guys eat? And did you guys sometimes not eat? And
my daddy had a garden mostly, and we grew vegetables and stuff like that. We had a couple of fruit trees in the backyard, peach tree and stuff like that. And there were a few other trees, like we had access to things like pecans right around us, even though they weren't ours. But anyway, they were available to us because the trees hung across the fence. So, some of that was available to us, along with the fruit trees, mostly fruit. We had, when I was young, we had what we call a chicken house, and we used to have chickens, and we would gather eggs. That's where we got our produce from, eggs from the chicken house. And so we grew a lot in the garden. We had produce, and then we did not have gas or anything like that. All of our heat was done by a fireplace or through a wood stove in the kitchen. And that meant we had to get up every morning and start a fire, or start the fireplace if we wanted to warm the house up. Or we had another stove. In the bedroom, there was, I guess what you call a potbelly stove at that point in time, that we used coal mostly in. You could put wood in there or you could put coal, but mostly you put coal in it. And so we had, in the kitchen was the cook stove, in the bedroom was the potbelly stove, and in the living room was the fireplace. Don't even mention air conditioning. Air conditioning didn't exist back then. Hardly.
So you just be hot?
Oh, in the summertime, you better find a way to get outside or else.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, there was no air conditioning, put it that way.
How about, did you have hot water? Did you have to boil water if you want to take a bath? How did that work?
Yeah, we did not have hot water in the house. Yeah, if you wanted water, you had to boil it. When I was very young, we didn't even have a bathtub. We had a tin tub that we used to bathe in. So you heat the water up on the stove. And we did have running water in the house now, but it was not hot.
Okay.
So if you wanted hot water, you had to heat it up on the stove. And you put the hot water in with the cold water that you would have already put in your tin tub to bathe with, and then you go bathe. I don't know. I guess maybe I was probably about 7 or 6 or 7 before we got one of the regular tubs, porcelain tubs in the house. But as a young child, we all bathed in a round tin tub.
So basically what? Someone boiled water, put it in a tub. First person was lucky because they got to be in a nice warm tub. And then...
No, you empty the water out and then the next one comes along.
Okay, I was thinking everybody just used the same water.
Oh, no.
Okay,
we
good.
We weren't that crash.
So
No, we didn't do that.
How was like a Christmas or Thanksgiving for you guys if you guys didn't have any money?
Not much.
So you guys, did you guys get Christmas presents?
Not much.
Okay.
We mostly got a fruit basket.
So each kid got a fruit basket?
Pretty much.
Oh, wow. Big difference.
Occasionally we would get a little, some little toy or something like that. And maybe you can remember getting a little toy gun or something like that. Pistol or something like that at some point in time. But mostly not. I can remember going out and some of my neighbors whose parents were things like domestic workers. Mind you, my dad is a teacher. But one in particular, probably one of my best friends, his daddy was a cook. But he cooked for people who were powerful people. And, he was able to really do well and have a good life, even though he was a cook, because he was working for people who were rich people. And they would provide him with supplements and stuff like that and make sure he and his family were taken care of. So basically, they were living better than we were. And like I said, my dad was a teacher, and he was a cook, but and working domestically. But they lived a lot better than we did.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because that you mentioned that your dad would give a lot of money to the church when he had money. Because my dad grew up the same way. So maybe that's how it was back in those days. Like my dad, he grew up dirt poor as well. Never had anything. And his mother, they were Catholic, and she would apparently go to the church every single day. In order to go to the Catholic church and go inside the church, you had to put money inside the box. Otherwise, you weren't allowed to go in there.
Whoa, okay.
Now, because of that, he barely ever had any food because his mom was always giving him to the church. So kind of understand how your childhood could have been. Because, like, you have a little money, but you're giving away to the church because you think the church needs money. But then at the same time, the family's suffering because they're giving all their money away because they think that the church needs it. Yeah,
and well, in terms of that, okay, he's supposed to be doing tithing and stuff like that, I suppose. But let's say on a particular Sunday, the minister gets up and says, we need $10 from everybody this Sunday, in order to fund this thing or for the building fund or whatever. Well, my dad would make sure he gave them $10. Some other people didn't do that. They made sure their kids got stuff and didn't give anything for the building fund. But my dad would give the $10, and I would go to school hungry. That was probably the biggest thing, is going to school hungry. And because people knew that. The neighborhood I lived in, most of the people knew that my father was a teacher, even though he didn't teach at the school I went to. And since I did not have lunch money, I would go to school in the morning, go all day long at school, hungry. Other people would eat lunch. I wouldn't even go in the cafeteria because I was too embarrassed for people to know that I didn't have lunch and stuff like that. And in the afternoon, the hunger pains would kick in. And so to me, sometimes it's amazing that I was able to make it throughout the day without, and still concentrate on my lesson. People talk about those things. You say, oh, well, the kids don't get anything. Well, I didn't either. And, I'm not trying to say just because I didn't that people shouldn't, but I didn't. And that's pretty, that's kind of poor there when you go from morning, you maybe have cornflakes or something like that for breakfast. And that's it. That's all you have all day till you get home in the afternoon at 3 something. And then the next thing you have is maybe a peanut butter sandwich or something when you get home in the afternoon. And then a little later you get something else, but.
So was it like that pretty much your entire childhood?
Yeah.
For years and years?
For years. Well, let me put it this way. When I went to college, I weighed about 135 pounds as a freshman in college.
Which is not much.
And I'm 6, and I was 6'1", almost 6'2". I was 6'2", 135 pounds. That's when I first got there. By the end of my freshman year, I was up to about 165, 170. Because I'm in college, and while, college is supposed to be deprivation, it was a far cry better than what I was doing at home. Put it that way.
So where'd you go when you were at school and everyone was going to the lunchroom?
Well, sometimes I'd go through the lunchroom. I wasn't like hiding out or anything like that. But basically, because some people brought their lunch, some people would buy lunch in the cafeteria. But basically, I was roaming around enough that people just didn't know what I was doing. They didn't know how I was not eating or whatever. They weren't aware of what the situation was. And I didn't want them to know what it was.
So basically, if your dad wasn't giving the money to church, you probably would have had a meal every single day at church. I mean, at school.
Wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that because we didn't have a lot of money anyway. But I just know that if the church needed something, he was going to make sure the church got it. I never could understand how he could allow his kids, me in particular, when I say me in particular, because my 2 younger sisters later on did get an allowance to go, Admittedly, there was a little more money available once I went off to college.
Okay.
But the fact is, it didn't happen when I was there, It didn't happen when I was there. And I'm being the only boy, to be honest, I could eat as much as my 3 sisters put together.
Yeah. Because
I was a grown boy. I was out playing football, basketball, stuff like that, burning up a lot of energy. And because I wasn't going to stop doing that, And I would come home and whatever we had for dinner, there's many times I ate as much as my 3 sisters put together. Because I'm a growing boy, I needed that nourishment, that energy that I was not getting otherwise. So food was a big thing to me growing up, Some of the other things, like friends, playmates had bikes. I didn't. I mean, I had a bike. I think at one point in time, I had a bike that was like 20 inches, And all of my friends had 26-inch bikes. Swins, as and the bike that I had, I never will forget, it cost $20 that I had to pay for. My daddy didn't buy that bike for me. A 20-inch bike that cost $20 that I had to pay for myself.
How old were you?
About 12.
Okay. Wow, you bought your own bike at 12 years old.
About that.
And where'd you get the money?
Hustling, selling things like tin cans, selling papers. I sold the paper that we had, Tri-State Defender at that time. And if I made $1 in a week, that was a good day. I mean, good week, kind of.
So you became a paper boy?
Yeah.
Okay.
A paper boy that does not have a route. which is a different kind of monster. That means you stand on the corner and hawk the paper, try to sell a paper to everybody that's coming by.
You really have to hustle.
Oh, you really have to hustle. And what it dawned on me, I didn't realize it at the time, but later on, the way I was able to recreate the time was remembering when the young boy Emmett Till was killed in Mississippi. It was 1955. I was born in 1946, and that would make me 9 years old at that time. I was out on the street selling papers at that time. I had been selling papers before he was killed, but when he was killed in 55, I can very distinctly remember that because I sold more papers that week when that edition came out with his picture on the front page of being all bloated and blown up like that. If you ever saw it, it's a picture you'd never forget.
Yeah.
Let's see, you went to the museum anyway, the Black History Museum in D.C., and they had an exhibit about him, in fact.
Yeah.
And they had a picture of him bloated. Maybe you remember that picture.
Yeah, I mean, he was badly beat.
Yeah, he's bad. His body was all bloated and stuff like that. But anyway, so that was a remembrance that I will never, ever forget. And so, but anyway, so I was 9 years old then. And I remember selling more papers that week than I ever did during my career, selling papers. But just think, I was 9 years old. I didn't really even consider that at the time. I thought I was old enough to do. I thought I knew what I was doing. Obviously, I didn't. But I was 9 years old, out hustling, trying to make money at that point.
Do you remember what you did with the money that you made selling all those newspapers?
Well, I didn't just go out and buy candy with it. I would maybe buy some. If I was able to save enough, I might even buy some clothes with it. Because here again, I wasn't getting those. A whole lot. I think I can remember at one point in time, like I had 2 pair of jeans, 1 pair of shoes, and about 2 or 3 shirts and stuff like that. The 2 pair of jeans would alternate. One's dirty, 1 pair of jeans dirty. I'd have to wash them and iron them, get them ready, and while I'm wearing the other pair of jeans. But that's all I had is 2 pair of jeans.
That's not much considering how it is. Most people nowadays have maybe 100 shirts.
Thank you.
12, well, I should say a dozen pair of jeans.
And then I had 2 pair of jeans. I did have a suit to go to church on.
Okay.
My daddy did buy me a suit. That was to go to church in, though. I ain't wear it anywhere else but to church. And then I had the 2 pair of jeans that I wore on a daily basis to school, out to play in, whatever. And when one was dirty, I washed that one and wear the other one. That was the extent of my wardrobe at that time. So that gives you an idea of what poor is. I mean, yes.
Yeah. Well, because that's the thing. It's like, especially nowadays in America, people might say, oh, I'm poor. But poor to them might be, well, we only have 1 car. We have food in the house, but we never get to eat out in a restaurant ever. Or maybe they don't take any vacations, but they have something. Or, especially nowadays, if you're a child and you don't really have a lot of money, you can go to school and they'll give you free lunch. Or you can go to, I grew up poor, but not to your extreme. And for Thanksgiving and Christmas, we would always go to these churches. And downstairs in the basement, they would always give us food, which I absolutely loved. And I didn't think anything of it. So it's interesting how there's different types of poor.
Okay, well, let me say something about that. Here's the irony of it. The fact that my daddy was a teacher, and many people felt like, well, his dad is a teacher, and so they must be doing pretty well. They did not know how we were doing.
Yeah.
They just assumed that. And so there were other people in the neighborhood who were in a home where there were multiple kids, maybe 5 or 6, a mother with 5 or 6 kids, no father. There were situations that I know of where people would allow for the boys or the sons to get some work in order to, supplement the family income, that kind of stuff. In my case, because my dad was a teacher, he doesn't need to have an extra job. One of my best friends who I grew up with lived right across the street from me. Is my age, almost a year older than me, but anyway, we're basically the same age. But for many years, he had a job as what do you call it now? But anyway, he rode a bike. He was a delivery boy for the grocery store. That's what it was. And so, people would order groceries from the grocery store, and the grocer would put them together. He'd put them in the basket on his bike, get on his bike and ride around the neighborhood and deliver the groceries. He had that job for at least 4 or 5 years, from about the 9th grade on till we graduated. It would have been a great job. I would have loved to have had that job, but I couldn't get it because he was from a family with all these sisters, no father in the home, and felt like, okay, let's let him have that job, Anyway, that's what the store person apparently. I don't know, but anyway, that's just an example of how things kind of went, where I didn't have nearly as much as some people who didn't have fathers in the home. Me personally didn't have it, because I had a father who was a teacher. And so therefore, we had to have something, even though we didn't.
Yeah, well, the thing, too, is like nowadays, teachers, they get paid a lot better. I mean, they're not rich by any means, but they do get paid better. But yeah, I remember talking to a guy, he was a teacher probably in, maybe like the 70s, and I think he said he maybe made like $10,000 to $15,000 a year. But back then, yeah, they didn't make a lot of money.
In the 70s?
Yeah, they didn't make a lot.
If he made that in the 70s, I don't know that they even made that in the 70s. I don't really remember what teachers made, but it wasn't a lot.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You'd think teachers would get paid a little bit better, but yeah.
Consequently, I said, one of the things that I never want to do is be a teacher.
Yeah, well.
And when I was in college, a lot of people would say, well, you need to go ahead and get this teacher certificate. You take a couple of extra courses on teaching in your major, and that gives you the certification to go and be a teacher. I said, no, I don't need to take this teacher certification, because I'm not going to be a teacher. I'll graduate from college, but I'm not going to be a teacher. So why do I, it's like back then they would say, well, get your teacher certification so you can fall back on it in case what you want to do, you're not able to get that job, or you're not able to do that. I said, well, if I'm not able to do that, I don't know, but I'm not going to be a teacher. So I don't need the certificate.
Yeah.
I'll graduate from college, but I don't need a teacher certificate, because I'm not going to teach.
No.
Period.
Especially growing up with a father that didn't have any money.
Yeah.
So some might say it would be impossible, because you became a medical doctor. You had parents who definitely could not afford for you to go to school. How were you able to go to college to become a doctor? And growing up in a family where you have a father who's educated, but becoming a doctor, I mean, that's probably pretty way, way, way far from the distance for some people. They wouldn't even think about that.
I did. I think the first time I can remember somebody asking me what did I want to be, I was probably about 8 years old, and I said a doctor. I didn't even know what a doctor was. I'd never seen a doctor in my life. I just, heard a doctor, and for some reason that's what I had decided I wanted to be. I didn't have a clue as to how I would get there, and I obviously didn't have the money to get there, but that's what I decided I want to be, and I figured, well, at some point I'll figure out a way to do it. As it turned out, I did, and I must credit my wife as much as anything with me doing it, because at one point in time I kind of had decided I was going to settle. I said, well, this is too hard. It's too many obstacles to go through to get into medical school. I'm just going to do what I'm doing. I'm an officer in the military. That's not a bad life, But she's the one who encouraged me to, if that's what you want to do, you should go for it. And so after 4 years in the military, living a good life, I must say we were really having a great time in, relatively speaking, making a decent living, considering where we were. But she said, if that's what you want to do, I think you should do it. And so at that point in time, I decided I would take the test to go. I resigned my commission in the military, and applied for medical school. The rest is history. I got in and did it. Paid for it myself, because at that point in time, I'd been in the military 4 years, so the GI Bill was available for me to pay for my medical education. And so I was able to pay for it all. It saved some money from being in the military. And between that and her working, we didn't want for anything while I was in medical school.
So growing up poor, you weren't able to do a lot of things. But as you got older, you knew if you put yourself in certain situations in life, you would do well.
Well, let me put it this way. I felt like I could do just about anything I set my mind to do if I was willing to do the work to do it. And I just needed to want to do it bad enough. And that's pretty much the way it turned out, you know. Throughout life, things that I have wanted to do, mostly I have done. When I was growing up, there were three things I was kind of passionate about. You asked me, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a musician, maybe, or a singer, and to fly an airplane.
Nice.
I've done all of those things. In the military, I became a flight surgeon, learned how to fly helicopters, and I did some fixed-wing private pilot training before I did that. So, you know, while I didn't do it on a professional basis, I did do it on an amateur basis, and with the military, I did it. That's semi-professional, considering the fact that I got qualified pilots flying with me. But I'm flying, you know, still. So I was able to fly, and I knew how to fly the helicopter, put it that way. So I was able to fulfill that goal. Singing, I sang with a little group once upon a time, and as a musician, I was a musician throughout high school. Let that go after high school. But anyway, those were things that I wanted to do, and pretty much everything that I said I wanted to do, I pretty much did it. The ultimate being a doctor, and once I got that, then I didn't care about any of the other things for the most part, because that was the ultimate goal.
So basically, you had determination and you had a vision.
And yeah, and so you just work towards that vision, and it happens if you work hard enough. For most people.
Yeah, that is incredible. So, being a doctor, what makes a good doctor? And the reason why I ask that is, maybe there's somebody who might be listening and they want to become a doctor, but they're like, I don't know if I'll be a good doctor. And maybe for someone who's a patient, how do they know, you know what, I need to stick with this doctor. He's really good. He really cares about me. All that kind of stuff.
Well, the first thing I say about it is being the smartest guy on the block does not make a good doctor. Maybe the smartest person may be able to technically do things, but that is not what being a doctor is all about. Being a doctor is as much art as it is knowledge about science and that kind of thing. There's an art to being a doctor. So like I say, being the smartest guy on the block does not make you a good doctor. I put that out there first off. But if you're smart and have the other things, it might make you the best, a great doctor. You know, if you're smart, you've got compassion, and you have the art of medicine, then that's, to me, those things that are things that make you a good doctor. I keep going back to smartness because, to me, I have not found that to be the greatest thing at all about being a doctor, being a good doctor. As an example, one of my classmates in undergrad school, I know for a fact, was probably not as well. He probably was not. I don't want to brag about things. Basically, when he and I would go head to head on things, I would almost always outdo him. There were times when we would study together, and he would be telling me things about the body parts that we'd be studying about. And anyway, things that I hadn't even thought about, we'd be as we study. We'd go take the exam the next day, and I would ace it, and he'd get a B. And I'm saying, hey, he's the one who was telling me about this last night, I hadn't bothered to even study it before, but I looked at it, and then I would make a better grade than he did on the test. So, it just told me that it was easier for me. Let me put it this way. It was easier for me to get grades than it was for him to get grades. But the difference is he had stick-to-itness. He worked hard and stuff like that. And he did really well. He became a surgeon as a result. But he had the desire and stick-to-itness and hard work. More than anything else, it was hard work. And his compassion about patients and stuff like that. And the right attitude about patients. He want to take care of people. And that is ultimately it right there, The other part is in the doctor's oath. It says, do no harm. If you can't do good, do no harm. Basically, that's the creed. And that's the thing that I think all doctors should live by. But a lot of them live by money. In this day and age, you can understand, if you realize what happens for people going to medical school, you can understand some of that. That medical school fees are so high that many times people going to medical school these days will have to think about going into a specialty where they can make a lot of money to pay back their medical school bills. Otherwise, they'd be struggling all their life, just trying to pay back bills and stuff like that. So it makes them maybe do something that they're not passionate about, but something that they can make money in. And that's not a good way to go. But, many people do that, and I know that's what happens a lot to doctors in this day and age.
Yeah, no, that's really good, because sometimes people think, well, I want to become a doctor, maybe, but I'm just not smart. I'm not a genius. I don't have an IQ of 180 like Einstein or something. But if they have really good heart, and it's really something that they really want to do, they should probably pursue it still.
Absolutely. It's all about, your desire, your passion, and hard work, If you've got a reasonable amount of intelligence, you can be a doctor. You just maybe have to work harder than the next guy, that's all. And then you can do much better than him if you continue to work hard. But I have met some doctors that maybe were geniuses on paper, but when you get them in a real situation, they were like bumbling idiots. They, maybe they knew how to do it academically, but they couldn't perform, when it came down to really doing the real art that it takes to practice medicine.
Now, what's the difference between being a doctor here in the United States, or, you've also worked overseas in military settings and hospitals. How is each of those different?
No different, because overseas with the military, you're doing the same thing that you would in the States.
Okay. Now, what's some of the most rewarding, of course you don't have to share the patient's names, but what are some situations that you've been in where you're like, I'm so glad I decided to do this, you were so proud of yourself?
What, with medicine?
Yeah, just we're working with patients, you were able to comfort people, or maybe somebody was going to deliver a baby and maybe they said it wasn't going to live, but maybe it did.
Well, obstetrics and gynecology, obstetrics in particular, is probably the area, as long as things go well and you get in the end you get a healthy baby, that's probably one of the biggest enjoyments of doing medicine that I experienced. Although I have had several instances throughout life that were very minor, but they were important to people. I can remember this one lady in particular who I saw, and she was, I say lady, she was a young lady, but I saw her, and she was overweight, and I guess in many cases one would say unattractive kind of person who people probably had overlooked throughout her life and treated her not so well. When she came to see me, and the way that I treated her, just like I would any other person that I would normally see, but to her it was different. And she basically sat there and cried in front of me and said, I have never been treated so nicely by a doctor in all my life, And I didn't do anything special, anything different than I would normally do. All I did was treat her like a normal human being and treat her with respect and stuff like that, which she was not used to having happen to her because she was overweight and not attractive. And I saw that, but that was not who I was looking at. I was looking at a human being, and I'm treating her that way. And she appreciated that, and that made an impression on me. That's something I will always remember, because, in the end, everybody is a human being, and they all deserve to be treated equally. That's just the lesson I learned from that. But I knew it beforehand. It just was reinforced with this patient.
Yeah, because, regardless of being a doctor, you're a human being, and you're not there to judge a person for whatever reason.
No, you're there to treat them as best you can.
Yeah, and that's someone's husband or wife or kid or mom or dad or whoever they might be.
Yes, that's true.
How would you define success? Like, what does success mean to you?
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that, really. I don't know that I have an answer for what success is. Because, like I said before, to me, the ultimate is happiness. And if you wanted, if I put any kind of definition on success, that's what I would go back to, happiness. If you're happy, that's success, no matter what you're doing. That's the best I can say for it. Success is not being a doctor or being a millionaire or doing this. That's not success to me. Happiness is success.
Yeah, because, for example, you became a colonel, which is a big deal. Some people, you start off as a private. If I become a captain, or I become a lieutenant colonel, or I become a colonel, for them, that might be success.
To some people. And there is, don't get me wrong, you have to go through things to get there. And so you would have done things to achieve those goals. And there's nothing wrong with that. And those are the things that one would consider success, in that those are successful goals that you have achieved. But like I say, to me, that's not the definition of success. To me, it's all about, there's one word, happiness. That's everything goes back to that to me. When you sum it all up, I put it all into that, and that's what it comes out to.
Yeah, because really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a colonel or you are married and you have kids, but if you're just miserable, you have all this money, you've reached this and that, all these milestones and highlights in life, but if you're just miserable and you're not happy, it really doesn't matter then.
Exactly. Those things really don't mean that much to me. They're just a means to an end, put it that way.
Yeah, that's very well said. This might be a little tearful. One of the things I greatly admire you is how incredible you were to your wife, Sylvia. I know, you really, really, truly loved her. And in that, I greatly admire, because a lot of people don't have that. So what is really, how do you find that? What makes the husband and wife successful, happy? Because for some people, really, their entire life, they look for that kind of relationship. And you've been very blessed to have that.
Well, you can't put it all on me. Okay, I appreciate the fact that you said that I treated her well. But it takes two people to tango. And that's what it's all about. If she had been different towards me, I probably would have been different toward her. But I see her as a good person with all her flaws. I've got flaws, she had flaws too. But I see her ultimately as a good person, good-hearted and stuff like that. In spite of what anybody might say, I think I'm a pretty good judge of people. And I judge her as a good person. And that was the most important thing to me. I think basically what it came down to is we both loved each other. And she was a good person, and I consider myself a good person. That's really what it all was about, and that's what made it work for us.
Yeah, but to be married, how long were you guys?
50 years.
50 years. Especially nowadays, people don't usually stay married that long. It's there must be some kind of special technique. I don't know what it is, but to make people...
Not really.
It's you hear these stories where people... I've read one story, I think, husband and wife, they're married for 80 years. I think they lived to almost 100. I think the husband died, and the woman, the very next day, she literally died because of a broken heart. She couldn't live any longer because she lost her husband. And just thinking about that love that people can have for each other, And that's just truly amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. She didn't want to live anymore without him.
Yeah, like how do people, how do you deal with all these situations? Because I'm sure you guys probably had arguments and fights just like everybody.
Sure we did.
It's all on how you handle it. So, like, what advice would you give to somebody who might be listening? Maybe they think, well, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids because, it's so much work. But it's really not. You just have to be willing to put yourself, be vulnerable.
There is work, but then as much as anything else is the commitment. And I think in both of our cases, we were committed to each other. There was never the thought of not being with each other, no matter what happened. And so whatever came up, we just would figure out a way to work through it. And we did. But, as I said, neither one of us were perfect. And we knew that. And we discussed things where we had both fallen down and, did things that were not the best, but we both were able to, get past all of the things that happened. I guess one of the things, though, I would say is you have to be careful about things that you say to a person, because there could be a time where you could just say some things that make it very hard for one to forgive or come back from. And so, I would say the best thing is, well, you don't need to go around on pins and needles, but still, you need to think about what you're saying when you say stuff. And I always did that, and I think she did too. We never would cross certain lines and stuff like that. If you do it and mean it, like for instance, if something came up and I meant it, then that's what would happen. And I'm not saying that it couldn't have happened, that we would have broken up, but that never happened in our case. We were always committed to each other.
Well, and having really good communication is very important.
Yeah, better communication on her part than mine, I must say. But
yeah, what advice would you have? Just raising kids, because sometimes one parent, they believe in doing this way, and then the other person believes, well, no, it has to be done this way. Like, how do you settle those differences?
Well, you just said a key word there, has to be. I don't think anything has to be. And if you have that mentality that it has to be a certain way, then you're going down the wrong path right there, I don't think anything should be so dogmatic as it has to be, that you say it has to be. It would be helpful to do it that way, but I don't think anything should be so absolute that it has to go that way, or else it's either that way or no way.
Yeah, because you might have some parents, we're definitely not like that, but there are people like this. One person believes in, well, if your kids don't behave, well, they should get punishment. Not like beating and spanking, all that kind of stuff, but maybe you take away something, and then other parent, well, I don't want to be mean and hurt little Timmy or whatever, so, we'll just let them do whatever they want, because I don't want to be that kind of mean parent. You have to have some kind of balance, though.
Yeah, you have to compromise, and then also you have to allow for a little bit of different discipline in the case. If one person is stricter than the other, well, maybe they continue that to a certain extent. But then there's a line that you cross, say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I see you doing it. But, you can only go so far. If you go farther than that, we're going to have a problem between us, with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that ever happened in our case. Fortunately for us, we were pretty much could be on the same page with the kids, and basically we almost never allowed them to see us disagree on anything that we were doing with them. So they would always see us as a united, And so if something happened that the kids wanted to do, they knew that they could not go to their mother and play her against their daddy, because that wasn't going to happen that way. If they went to their mother and she said one thing, and then they tried to come back to their daddy and get something different, even if the daddy thought differently, it was probably, it probably was. Now, what would happen maybe is we would go and we would talk about it with each other and come to a compromise, and we might do just what they wanted to do in the end. but it would be after we have discussed it. And it would be something that we as a couple felt was to be done. One person didn't say, oh, we're going to do this because I want to do it. No, that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, that's good. You guys talked about it as a team,
right,
before you guys decided to do anything. And also
important things, little things, there's little things that weren't discussed like that,
Yeah,
but I'm talking about important things.
And then to make sure that your kids, they know if one parent says something, it's going to go that way. They're not going to be able to get away with things with the other parent.
No, you can't go to the other parent and get a different answer.
Yeah, no,
ain't going to happen.
That's really good. What way would you really call like a successful marriage? Because you have some people, well, they don't have a very successful marriage. This person, wow, they're very successful, they're happy. I mean, what makes it doesn't have to be successful marriage, but a good marriage?
I don't know. How do you know when somebody has a good or successful marriage? You don't know that. I think only the people in the marriage know that, whether it's successful or happy, because you can put on a face for people, and behind the scenes, you may be miserable or terrible. But the face you put on to people might make it seem like, oh, they got an ideal marriage. So I can't really say what makes a successful marriage. It's only what those two people think is a successful marriage. But I guess if you stay together 50 years, something must be going right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd figure out a way out of it,
Yeah, no, that's true, because don't really know exactly, but I'm sure there's situations where you could have a husband and wife and they don't really get along, and maybe they have some friends and like, wow, our friends over there, they're always so happy and they have the great marriage, but at the end of the day, really, they could be the most miserable people. They just
absolutely
it looks like they have a great marriage, but actually you guys are happier than they are. It just looks like they're happy, but maybe they're about to get divorced next week. You really don't know.
A good example of that is like in the case of Sylvia and I. We've been in the grocery store sometime. I can remember being in the grocery store, and we're up at the checkout counter, and we're bickering over something. And the checkout person says, how long have you all been married? And we'll tell them, this I can tell because of the way you all are going. They can tell, okay, now we're fussing over something, but it's not a serious thing. And they can tell that whatever it is, we're going to be fine when it's all said and done. And they can tell that we've been married a long time just by virtue of the way we're interacting with each other. Now, many people would go up there and they would cover up the fact that they're upset about something. We didn't do that, If it's something, we just let it hang out there, and people would see it and laugh about it or whatever. Obviously, we didn't talk about serious issues like that, but the stuff that we did talk about were things that were open to people, and we weren't around hiding stuff, and trying to say, oh, we've got the perfect marriage. No.
But also, too, you guys didn't. Some people, they might sweep things under the rug, like they don't really address them. But if you guys ever had an issue with each other, you would always talk about it.
Yeah, and depending on what the issue is, we'd probably talk about it in private. But small things like that, we didn't mind addressing it in public.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good thing. This is a big challenge. Now, for someone, like yourself, you lose someone you absolutely love. They're your best friend, your partner. What advice would you give them just dealing with the loss of a loved one? Because that can be very, very hard for a lot of people. It's never easy, but how do you deal with that? I mean, it's important to have friends and family, people you can talk to. But, I mean, there might be somebody who listen to this. Maybe they lost a husband, wife. They don't have any kids. They don't really have any support. I mean, like, what's the best thing to do?
What I would say about that is you deal with it all your life. If you have been true to yourself and you've been true to the person that you are with, and then when you lose them, you don't have a lot of issues with it because you know that you have been true to yourself, you've been true to them, you have done as far as you're concerned, the right thing by them. And so therefore you can be at peace with yourself and still have memories of what went on when both of you were alive and together. That to me is the best thing. If you are a person who's mean and you've done backhanded things and stuff like that, I think it's going to haunt you, and you will probably be miserable after that person's gone because you didn't do right by them when they were alive.
That's good.
And so, if you do the right thing, you'll be fine, I think, afterwards.
Yeah, peace. Yeah, because, I mean, being a doctor, I'm sure you've been in a lot of situations where you had to tell people, they lost somebody, and that's very hard. I remember where I worked, we had a patient of ours, and he told me a story. I think he had like 3 kids. One of his sons, young guy, probably like maybe 19 years old, he was in a car accident. He said it was his fault, but his son died, and he says it completely destroyed their entire family. I mean, that's horrible to lose a child, but I mean, to allow that horrible situation to completely destroy your family, like, how do you deal with that, and how do you not? Because I mean, that's horrible, but you can't let that completely destroy your relationship with your wife, your other 2 kids who are still alive.
Well, you say you can't let it, but sometimes you can't help it, because things like depression come into play. You lose a child, it's easy for somebody to get depressed over that.
Yeah.
Okay, you get depressed. Okay. In one situation, maybe the other spouse blames him for, allowing the child to be killed or dead. In other situations, you might blame yourself, and you can't get past the fact that you feel responsible. Your spouse might not say, they may say, well, you couldn't do any better. They may be okay with it, but if you blame yourself and you're depressed over it, I know situations where that happens, and the couple ends up, they just have to go their own separate ways because, they're not able to get past it. They're not able to get I don't know, other than to say that if you can grieve in whatever the correct way to grieve is, and be together as a couple, then you can get through those things. But if you're separate, and if you've had issues beforehand, those issues will only be magnified in a situation like that, and can easily cause you to separate and break up.
Yeah.
Destroy the family completely.
Yeah, well, that's why you can't blame yourself. I mean, especially for this guy. I mean, who knows? I don't know if he bought his son the car. He could have blamed himself for buying the car. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it was his son's responsibility. He drove the car. He even told me he drove it recklessly. He was driving too fast. So, I mean, through your military career as a colonel, what did you learn about leadership while serving in the United States Air Force and the United States Army? Being a colonel, you're definitely in a leadership role. You're around a lot of guys who are high-ranking. These are leaders. These are guys who men respect them, hopefully, and they follow their lead. And you're definitely a big role model to these guys. So you are definitely a big leader in it.
I think as my leadership style and skill, it really has to do with philosophy of treat other people as you would like to be treated, kind of. But then that goes with my overall philosophy. And when I say that, treat other people the way you would like to be treated, sometimes that's not always the best thing, because the way you might like to be treated in one situation might not be the greatest thing, and for the other person, they might have a totally different mindset about that. But in the end, overall, I think it all balances out in the sense that I don't think you'll want to be treated badly in any situation, but different people might feel different about what's good treatment and what's bad treatment. Ultimately, you're not doing something that's going to hurt somebody, because you're not going to want somebody to hurt you, in essence. And so, basically that's the philosophy of it that I look at. Treat other people as you would like to be treated.
Yeah, which is the first thing you pretty much learn in kindergarten. Your parents tell you this all the time: treat people the way you want to be treated. It's pretty simple, but we make it so hard, I guess, or complex.
Yeah, I suppose so. But anyway, is I go back to you go back to my Air Force days. As I said, with the Air Force, it would run more like a corporation in terms of how we did things in the workplace. As I had pointed out in many cases, my philosophy about things is you don't just do things to make work for people. You don't have them do stuff just because you can. You do it because it's necessary. And if it's not necessary, find something else to occupy their mind or whatever, or allow them to have some leisure time, whatever. Because I think about myself, hey, if I don't have anything to do, maybe I would want to go to the golf course and spend a couple hours. Well, my guys, maybe they want to go play cards or whatever, or go play basketball or go to golf. We don't have anything to do, let them do it, that kind of thing. That's a part of, to me, leadership. Because then when something else comes along that you need these people to have your back and do things over and above, they will follow you and they will do that for you because they know that you have looked out for them when things were different. When things are down and you look out for them, then they will look out for you and they will follow you. If they think that you are a person who is all about yourself and you punish them unjustly or whatever, they're not going to look out for you and they're not going to follow you. They will do things because you are the one in power and you force them to do it. But if you treat people right, they will do things because they want to do it, because you have shown them that you care about them, and they will care about you in turn and do for you. So that's, to me, and ultimately kind of sums up what leadership is about.
So, like being a colonel, being a doctor, like what are some of the big responsibilities you have as a leader? Yeah, because
make decisions.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. People who maybe want to become a colonel or maybe they want to become a doctor, there's responsibilities that they need to understand. It's very important because people expect a lot. Well, they expect things from you, and you have to have certain personal qualities. Treating people right, taking care of people. That kind of thing.
Well, one thing, first off, you have to realize that as the saying goes, the ball stops here. If you're the leader, and something goes wrong, you have to be willing to take responsibility for it. No matter, you can intuitively know that this person actually did that thing, but unless they were doing it in a malicious way, then the ball really comes to you as the leader, and you have to take responsibility for making it right or doing whatever it takes to fix this particular problem. And I digress a minute to say our president is the total opposite of that. So he is not a leader that anybody would consider a good leader. He is the worst kind of leader. I could probably talk about him more and tell you what not to do in leadership roles.
Yeah.
In the sense that he would do stuff like he would like to get a group of people in a room and pit them against each other and see who would come out on top. That's not good leadership. That's I don't know what that is. He does it for his own enjoyment.
Well, one thing you have, you're an African American guy. You became a colonel in the Air Force. The Army, and you became a doctor. And I'm sure your father was a big mentor to you in some way, or other guys were. So for somebody who might be listening, maybe we have a young African American man. Maybe he doesn't have role models in his life, but he wants to do something. He has these big dreams, but it just may be stuck. I mean, it could be. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be an African American person. It could be anyone who's a minority who feels, hey, it is harder for me. There's more challenges for me. What kind of advice would you give that person? Because, obviously you didn't let any situation in your past, being poor, having a father who didn't have a lot of money, pay for you to go to school. You were always able to find a way to do something because you had a vision. You knew exactly what you were going to do, and you did not take anything as an excuse because you knew you were going to do this. And you did it, which is just amazing. But there are some people who might want to do things, but they just, I don't know if I can do this. Well, what kind of advice? Maybe get mentors?
Well, first of all, let me see. The first thing that I would never do is tell a person that they can't do something. Now, I'll be honest and say, I have looked at people who told me they wanted to do something, and in my own mind, I'm thinking, I'm not so sure this person really has the wherewithal to do what it is that they want to do. But I'm not going to be the one to tell them that they can't do it because maybe they got some inner stuff that I just don't see,
Yeah.
And so that's number one. I would never tell anybody you can't do that. You should go ahead and be a janitor or something like that because I don't think you're smart enough to do whatever it is that you want to do. That's the first thing. I wouldn't say, oh, great, you can do that. Now, I don't say it that way, but if I'm questioning what this, I basically would tell them, well, you can probably do anything that you really set your mind to do, that you really want to do, and you have to work. You have to work hard at it. You may have to work harder than the next person, but if that's really what you want to do, and you keep working at it, even though it takes you longer, and you have to work harder to do it, then you should do that. That's pretty much the advice I give them. And in my mind, like I said, I may have another narrative, but that's never the narrative I give anybody. Because, like I say, working hard and willpower and really wanting things, people who don't have the innate ability can find ways to get past that. They do. And you should never, minimize the fact that people are able to do things that they would not normally, you wouldn't expect them to be able to do. So,
yeah, no, that's good.
Encourage them.
Yeah, because sometimes people, they want to do something, but they don't do it because I don't have the money. I can't afford to go to college. Or my parents don't believe in me. Or they say, you're not good at that. But really, I've been told,
none of those are good reasons.
Yeah, it's not good reasons, but also, too, maybe that person doesn't think they can do it. And that's why it's a reflection of them. They're like, you can't do that. But really, it's because they don't think they can do it. It has nothing to really do with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for some people, would you recommend maybe they should get a mentor, somebody who's doing what they want to do?
I would always recommend that if you can. That's the best thing that you can do.
Like, did you have a mentor? Like, who?
To be honest, me, I set my own course.
Okay.
I never really had a mentor because there was nobody ever there doing that for me,
So you had to be very driven, very driven.
Well, I just had my own ideas about what I wanted to do and stuff like that, and I would think about it and chart how I was going to go about it. I was going to get from one place to the other.
That's really incredible. So if you could go back to, I don't know, maybe when you're 18 years old, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah.
Would you have changed your life in any way, shape, or form? Any
Well,
regrets?
you should ask that. There's one thing that I talk about all the time whenever this question comes up. There's really only one thing that I would really change, and then that is, instead of going into the Army when I was in medical school, I would have gone back to the Air Force. I had an opportunity to do that. I was being offered a scholarship by both the Air Force and the Army after my first year in medical school. But because the Army was there first, and I'd gone through the process, and the recruiter was telling me, if you go in the Army, you will have more pathology, more sick people, in other words, to deal with than you will in the Air Force, because we got a lot more people. As a 25-year-old, at the time being idealistic, 26, that was something that I thought was a good thing. I want to see a lot of sick people. In retrospect, that was probably... Anyway, no, I still would have wanted to see a lot of sick people because, I was one to learn and stuff like that. But really it had more to do with, but anyway, that would be the thing I would change. I would have gone into the Air Force and not the Army. I would have gone back into the Air Force, put it that way. There is a world of difference between the Air Force in terms of the way they treat people, in terms of the creature comforts that are available to people in the Air Force and that are available to people in the Army. And so that's something that I would have done different.
That's good. Going into military, just want to talk about that briefly. I'm sure there's probably different types of personalities for each branch of military. Like somebody who's thinking about, I want to join the Marines, or I want to join the Army, or the Navy, or the Air Force. Like, how do you really decide which one's probably best for you based on the way you are? I mean, is there really...
It's hard to know because you don't really know what they are like until you get in them, really. I don't think you can know really what the Air Force is like until you join. Or the Navy. One thing I know about the Navy is they go on boats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And for my vantage point, that's like being in a prison. You're out on a boat, especially a submarine or something like that. I can't imagine being underwater. A submarine forever. Anyway, again, so things like that could, are obvious that can make your decision. As far as like the Navy, you don't want to be out on the water forever, so that's not a good place for you. Marines, what can I say about Marines? I think of Marines, to be honest, is people who are trying to prove themselves. People who want to be men, they want to prove that they're a man. So they go rah-rah and they go to the Marines and do all the stuff, to prove that they can fight and they can do these kind of things.
Yeah, which is fine if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. But that's people who are, who have, to me, in a lot of cases, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, have insecurities about their abilities, and so they got to go do that to prove themselves. Like in my case, I didn't really feel I was short of anything, so I didn't need to prove myself.
Yeah.
In that way, to know that I was a man, I didn't need to go to the Marines to do that.
Yeah.
The Air Force. I just like the thought of flying and being, in pilot and stuff like that. Even though because of my vision, I couldn't be a pilot, I could be around those guys and stuff like that. So that's what was attractive about the Air Force for me.
Then how about the Army?
The Army was just an afterthought, really.
Okay.
There was nothing really. I really didn't have anything against the Army. Turns out I should have. And if I had known a little more about it, I would have realized that was not the place to be. But at the time, I just thought, hey, Air Force, Army, what the heck, I've had 5 years in the Air Force. It was really good. I enjoyed it so well that, how much worse could the Army be?
Yeah.
Turns out a lot worse. But I didn't know that.
So I guess if someone is thinking about joining the military, they really also need to probably look at the different types of jobs that are available and what they can do, maybe?
Yeah. A lot of the jobs are similar in all of the services. Oh, okay. Because the Army has airplanes.
Yeah.
The Navy has airplanes. All the services have airplanes. But the Air Force has the majority of them, the biggest number and the biggest variety and stuff like that. But everybody's got airplanes to a certain extent,
Yeah, well, then I guess if your goal is to be a Marine, be a Marine. If you want to be a Green Beret, join the Army. If you want to be a Navy SEAL, and that's your goal, which it is for some people, then join the Navy. I mean, it depends on, I guess, what your goal is.
Speaking of those, probably, at least, I don't know anything about the Navy, but I would, based on all the knowledge that I have accumulated about it, the Navy SEALs are probably the most rigorous, toughest challenge that anybody would have to go through in the military. You go through and become a Navy SEAL, and you, to me, that's the top of the line.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think it gets any better than that.
No. Yeah, because I have a friend. He's a Marine. I think he retired as a captain, but he went through buds. He didn't make it very far, but he's like, yeah, no, that's. You think going through boot camp for Marines is tough? There's no comparison. To that. Yeah, piece of cake. So for anyone who might be listening, what are some like life lessons and things you'd like people to take away from this whole interview?
I don't know. Just be true to yourself and follow your dreams if you can. if you can't, do what you have to do to survive and be the best that you can be. Those are just, platitudes kind of, but, that's really all I can say about it,
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I love you very much. Thank you.
Okay. You are most welcome.
Johnny here. Thank you for listening to the Power of Your Voice podcast. I would absolutely love to get your feedback on this episode and how it impacted you. Reach out to me on Instagram by sending a direct message to username Voice Podcast. If someone in your life could benefit from this episode, share it with them and check out thepowerofyourvoice.com to read blogs on each podcast episode and learn more about what was discussed. And please, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. This lets me know you find this show valuable. And thank you for listening.